The Heavenly Demon. Can't Live a Normal Life. By Sanchin. Chapter 40. The Flower of Lawrence. Part 1. 10 days earlier, Lawrence's foot kicked the ground. The Martel family turned down our offer. The same goes for the Bartra family. Even though we said we would accept building the distribution network they asked for, they suddenly said they couldn't help us out. Lord. It seems that it is actually difficult to get help from those around us due to the pressure of the Barco family. Bang! Damn it! At the report of vassals, Viscount Lawrence couldn't contain his anger and smashed the table. Before the dispute with Barco, Martel and Bartras were places that came to form connections with Lawrence. Lawrence then gave them fertile lands and power in the northeast region, and Viscount Lawrence maintained an amicable relationship with them. Thus, the Viscount remembered the relationships from back then and asked them for help. However, the lord of the two families, who always greeted Lawrence with a smile, showed a cold attitude this time. He understood it. Recently, rumors were going around in the northeast region, rumors that if a single force interferes with Barco's actions by intervening in the dispute between Lawrence and Barco, they will retaliate against them after Lawrence fell. Everyone knew that the rumor was spread by Barco intentionally, but despite that, their families were scared. Barco blocked the possibility of getting help. Now that there is a week of probation, Viscount Lawrence felt choked up. Did you get a call from the Golden Bank? Yes. They said they would consider a land-based loan, but it doesn't seem like it. Will work out in a week. Golden Bank isn't a neutral force. Moreover, as they invested a large amount in the Barco family, they seem to have decided that empowering the Barco family will be more beneficial for them than helping us. Sigh. The Viscount felt dizzy. The Golden Bank wasn't a force limited to the Cairo kingdom, but a force that boasted enormous capital power that affected the entire continent. Their home base is said to be the Valhalla Empire, which is one of the two empires. Actually, they were a force that put on a neutral position based on their values, but in problems in which their interests are at stake, they openly favor the advantageous side. Barco and Lawrence, the odds were higher for Barco, so it was better to side and invest in them. So are you saying there is no answer? Last few weeks, Viscount Lawrence was running all over to solve the problem. The breakup with Dimitri put Lawrence in a corner, but he tried to do anything to survive. He met many people while talking about the past. Among them, the contact with Golden Bank was such an attempt. It was something he did despite knowing it would fail. If he could borrow money, he could hire mercenaries like the Barco family. However, the Foxes in Golden Bank didn't do business as that could cause them a loss. And now, he was stuck at a dead end. Everything is over. After a week, Barco will come to attack, and Lawrence will not be able to withstand the attack. I should have calmed the heart of Dimitri. Dimitri, their presence turned into poison. Even when he was prepping for the marriage with Dimitri, he wondered if the problems would get resolved, but he turned his back on Dimitri, and now, even the forces on Dimitri's side didn't help. The real powers in the northeast region are Barco and Dimitri. And now, both families were hostile to him, making Lawrence a loner. This is bad. A woman sitting at the far end of the room spoke cautiously when the vassals couldn't speak. Father, can I say something? Her identity, she was Lawrence's golden jade leaf, Flora Lawrence. Roman Dimitri, starting with the meeting with that man, Flora's common sense about the world had completely collapsed. My judgment was wrong. I was prejudiced against Roman Dimitri, and the real fool was me, not him. Roman's actions were shocking. At first, she only thought that Roman had meddled with something, but as time passed, she learned the details of them. Roman killed Ben Miles, the leader of the Blood Fang, in front of so many people. Moreover, all of it was done with Roman's own strength, which was more shocking. The purpose of dealing with Blood Fang came from them harassing the people in Dimitri's estate, and knowing that Lawrence's response was insufficient, he was bold enough to make drastic decisions. Suddenly, Flora felt ashamed. Although the eldest son of Dimitri was called an idiot, he was doing something for his family. However, she was someone who broke the marriage and put the Lawrence family in danger. If she could turn back time, at least the drastic choice of breaking the engagement would be held, and she would at least try to get to know the guy. I was stupid. Choosing to break the marriage without taking any measures was a choice that would inevitably lead my family to destruction. There was a time when she thought she was smart, after completing the advanced courses in the academy with good grades and seeing her father smiling brightly, she thought she was the perfect daughter. However, she didn't know back then the fact that studying something while receiving the support of her family wasn't something the world works on, and that she was just a flower in a greenhouse. And outside the greenhouse, wild animals like Barco often lurked. They drooled and showed their teeth, and they didn't care what Flora's life had been like. Flora announced the breaking of the engagement and locked herself in her room. Still, marriage should be done with someone who you love. That concept didn't change for her, but in the face of reality, she didn't have the courage to face her father. Because of her mistake, her father went to beg for help each day. The lights in the conference room of the family never went out, and when the meeting was done, she couldn't dare approach the vassals who looked dead and hopeless to her. As Flora Lawrence, known as the Flower of Lawrence, this was a harsh time for her, who had only seen and experienced good things till now. She was in pain. She would have a fever in the middle of the night and wake up in cold sweat. With time, it became more frequent. In Flora's mind, Roma's image often emerged. How could he have done such a thing? With his own strength, in a situation where no one expected him to do so, Roman boldly acted out his choices for the family. It was amazing. Aside from the fact that such a thing was possible, it looked much more interesting as he had made up his mind to do such a thing. And from that point on, Roman began to appear in Flora's dreams, and her heart changed little by little as that happened. And one day, she made a decision: let's not turn away from reality. Flora, if no one helps us, then just as Roman Dmitri defeated the Blood Fang himself, we need to find a way to solve our problems. In a dark room, Flora came out. With her hair tied up so she could comfortably move, she went to the library of Lawrence and grabbed a few books. Right, the type of book she grabbed was on military law, which helped one prepare for war. Flora said, "We are pushed to a corner now. Barco cut off the help from around, and the difference in power is too obvious. Thus, there is an opinion that we should preserve even a little of the family's land through surrender, but I don't think it will work." "Why do you think so?" "Rather than killing innocent people, surrender is the best option for everyone," asked Viscount Lawrence. Seeing the questionable look in his eyes, Flora looked at him with a calm face. Barco borrowed money from the Golden Bank using their connections. Rumor has it that the loan process was conducted without any collateral, so a loan without collateral would inevitably have a higher interest rate. In this war, Barco isn't a complete benefit. In order for both the borrower and lender to get good results, the land will be torn apart after Lawrence gets captured. Half will be taken by Barco and the other half by the Golden Bank. And yet, their thirst will not be quenched. Thus, they will have to scratch till the bottom of any safe to get their satisfaction's worth of things. Ahem. The vassals didn't like this. It was a cruel remark, but no one could deny the reality. Then what are we supposed to do? There is only one way: a desperate resistance. That is the only way we can survive. Resistance, is that really the best choice? Viscount Lawrence looked disappointed. Flora's remarks raised his expectations for her. He thought that she had the ability to see the situation accurately and judge it, but in the end, she failed him. Locking the gates of the estate, anyone could think that this approach she was speaking of was different from others. It isn't just about holding on against their attacks. Give up farming this year and set fire to the fields. And after hoarding as much food as possible to survive, we keep resisting until the winter comes. Can we even survive till winter? Yes. Barco borrowed a large amount of money for this war. Although they used the connections to make loans without collateral, in fact, the Golden Bank isn't a force that will do tasks because of the pressure from higher-ups. The bank is a force that affects the entire continent. If war doesn't end quickly and time extends, the Barco Family will have to face pressure regarding the high interest rate. The larger the loan, the higher the interest. That is the only weakness we can attack. The mercenaries will run for the money, and the money will come from the golden bank. And when the winter comes, the weather will be unfavorable for a siege, and people are bound to be exhausted or tired. Then, it'll be natural for them to think about backing out. Such a way was there. At Flora's words, the vassals admired her. At first, they were puzzled, but the more she spoke, the more they fell in love with her words. This made sense, a race against time. Since Barco's power wasn't their own, there was a chance of winning if they dragged the time. When did my daughter grow up this much? Viscount Lawrence looked at his daughter with a complicated expression. His only daughter, the one he raised so preciously while being wary of breaking her, like a flowering plant in the greenhouse, was now blooming. And when the thing with Dmitri happened, Viscount Lawrence thought that he had given her too much privilege and she was immature. However, the truth was different. When faced with a situation where they were sinking, Flora showed her colors. She must have suffered so much due to her incompetent father. Flora's face was frowning. Her suffering was now appearing on her face. His daughter, he didn't want to see such a lovely child collapse in the hands of the Barco family. Viscount Lawrence said, "Flora is right. The Barco family isn't a force that holds much power in their hands. So, prepare for a desperate resistance right now. We will hold on and preserve, and we will continue as Lawrence." The decision was made. There will be no surrender. The white flag will not rise. The Lawrence family decided to endure the troubles till the end, even if it meant they would die. A week after that, the day of the battle that Barco had foretold finally dawned. Chapter 41. The Flower of Lawrence. Part 2. Step. Down the wall, they saw someone walking. Even though many people were looking down the wall, there was no fear in his steps, and the flag in his hands was fluttering in the wind. A white deer was standing alone. At the symbol of the Barco family, Lawrence soldiers gulped with nervous faces. Tack. Finally, he stopped walking. The man looked around the top of the wall with a relaxed expression, and when he saw Viscount Lawrence, he stopped his gaze. As Viscount Barco's representative, I will give you 3 options from now on. First, open the gates and surrender. Viscount Barco is merciful to those who ask for forgiveness, and surrendering is the only way to save your lives. However, you might not choose the first one. If that is the case, there is no reason for us to face each other as of now. The messenger looked arrogant. At best, he looked like he was speaking and communicating his intentions, as if he was Viscount Barco. The second is to go to war with us. In front of the people of the central government, let us head into it and decide the fight fairly. Any method of fighting is good, be it hand-to-hand combat or a warrior battle, we will follow the way you want. Hand-to-hand combat or warrior battle, nobles mainly used this method to cover their mistakes. The people of this world considered it shameful to wage a siege just because of a dispute among nobles. He thought they were hiding behind the wall as they weren't competent in dealing with the other family. Naturally, most of the nobles would choose one of 2 ways. Also, that was why the people of the central government were present. They would be neutral to the method they would choose to fight it out. Viscount Lawrence took a step ahead. We do not think your declaration for war is justified. The document that mentions our ancestors' dead is forged, and we have no cause for war with you nor any desire to open the gates and sacrifice the lives of Lawrence's people. So go back now and tell Viscount Barcos. Lawrence will. Third. He stopped talking. Actually, the choice was already decided. On the day Barco predicted, from the moment Lawrence shut its gates, the 2 families would choose the third option. Still, there was one reason for sending the messenger. It was to pressure Lawrence, and the messenger informed the soldiers of Lawrence. You have chosen to abandon the pride of being a noble family and fight a deadly fight within the fortress walls. From now on, the Barco family will accept your will and make you pay the price by bloodshed during this siege. That was the end of it. The messenger stepped back. Even when they saw the flag fluttering in the wind, Lawrence couldn't fire an arrow. And finally, the war had begun. The first battle ended sooner than expected. The Barco family, who thought they could punish Lawrence right away, gave the order of retreat within 30 minutes of the start. Bang! Cheeky bastards! Viscount Barco threw the helmet he was wearing to the ground. Just now, the aspect of the battle was different than expected. The army of the Barco family was 3 times greater than Lawrence, and intending to destroy the walls at once, he led his men. Lawrence's walls weren't very high. It was known that Dimitri's stronghold fortress was difficult to capture even with 10 times the current force, but that wasn't the case for Lawrence. He thought he could get it done within an hour. But what happened? Lawrence's counterattack was more fierce than he expected. Viscount. Apparently, Lawrence was fully prepared for it. A moat was dug deep to block the approach of the troops, and they prepared boiling oil and fire, as well. Also, judging from the non-existent hesitation in firing the arrows from the wall, it appears they managed to secure enough supplies, said the lieutenant. He felt annoyed. 1 week, that time wasn't enough for the opponent to prepare. He was going to take down Lawrence and make them surrender, but they chose to fight in this desperate situation. According to our known information, Lawrence should have surrendered with the thought to protect a little of their hand. We completely blocked the possibility of an alliance, and we showed superiority in our troops. However, Lawrence was prepared, with the intention to lock the gates. They couldn't have dared to risk their lives for it. Barco's plan, they weren't hoping for war from the start. The Golden Bank and the judge were also brought. Thus, they thought about letting the opponent surrender. However, now, the plan was going haywire. It was just 30 minutes, but the response from Lawrence was too systematic, and considering the action of setting fire to the fields they owned, it seemed like they were prepping for a long battle. It was the moment that their heads ached at the current situation. As Flora predicted, the Barco family borrowed huge sums of money from the Golden Bank, and ending the war as quickly as possible was the only way the Barco family could stay alive. Viscount, what should we do? The lieutenant looked into his eyes. Dozens of soldiers were lost in this small fight. They were going to check the power of Lawrence, but due to the fierce counterattack, their losses were more than expected. Viscount Lawrence isn't that strong-willed. Just like he sold his golden jade leaf to the Dimitri family under Barco's pressure, he is someone who turns into a coward in crisis. Nevertheless, choosing to fight means that changes have taken place within. They wouldn't have made a choice if they didn't have an advantage, and they are clearly showing the advantage they have with the war dragging on. He thought quickly. This war, all of it was Viscount Barco's plan. He moved his son Anthony Barco and quarreled with Lawrence with forged documents that led to this war. And now, finally, they were in the endgame. This was the end of the plan, so Barco couldn't give the lead to Lawrence. How about it? Prepare it right now. I understand. Viscount Barco smiled bitterly. There was something the Lawrence family had overlooked. Viscount Barco only wanted to win with the least number of people out there, but it wasn't as if he wasn't concerned about the possibility of defeat at all. The Golden Bank, they had lent more money than he expected. And that money was enough to create a huge variable. Above the wall, the soldiers of Lawrence moved busily. The victory in the first short battle brought smiles to their faces, but they all knew they couldn't relax right now. Move fast. We never know when his men will attack us again. Stay alert and move quickly. One win, that gave them confidence. It proved Barco wasn't an unbeatable opponent for them. Viscount Lawrence said, Flora, you were right. Just preparing for this in a standard manner was enough for us to prevent the attack from Barco. How did you manage to come up with this idea? You only learned the skills of nobles in the academy. I don't think they taught you things such as warfare. A change in Flora was surprising. Flora's opinions were actively presented in the process of setting fire to the fields and preparing for war. Flora looked at the soldiers. Her attire was the same as theirs. Normally, a noblewoman would dress in an elegant dress, but now, she was wearing armor on the top. She even practiced archery over the past few days to help in the battle. Of course, her skills hadn't increased much with just a few days of preparation, but her attitude had brought a rise in the soldiers' morale. The flower of Lawrence, Flora was the symbol of Lawrence. Because she didn't give up till the end, Lawrence's soldiers who saw her didn't lose hope either. Flora said, as father said, the academy didn't teach me how to fight. They said there was no need to learn such things because I would never go to the battlefield while living as a noblewoman. However, seeing the Barco family's behavior, I knew I had to be strong-willed. Rather than waiting for the problems to get resolved on their own, I had to know what the problem was and develop the ability or way to solve it. Thus, I studied on my own. That is the direction I want to live in the future, as well. Flora. Don't worry. This is what I want to do. Flora's words made his heart ache. Had there been someone strong in the family, or if the family was strong, she wouldn't have to experience this. However, that allowed Flora to grow up in a short time as well. Nevertheless, it was daunting, the fact that his daughter was fine with this. His daughter had grown up pleasingly, and he didn't even know it yet. As long as the problem with Barco gets resolved, this father will make sure to never bring any quarrels into your future. I am sorry for forcing you to marry Dmitri. At that time, I thought that was the only way our collapsing family could survive. However, now, I believe that you can make the right choices in any situation. They ended it, the conversation was postponed. To be precise, they couldn't help but talk about this another time. Ugh. No way. The soldiers were shocked. Over the wall, at Barco's camp, they could feel a movement. It was huge. The overall shape was like a catapult. However, those who saw it knew this wasn't a simple catapult. That's insane. Barco prepared a flare. Flare, the name of a siege weapon. The catapult known as flare was designed to throw something at the wall, a magic weapon that caused explosions. It was a magical weapon that could be bought with an enormous amount of money. The cost was truly high, but everyone knew of its effectiveness. This was an unexpected development. No matter how much money Barco borrowed, they didn't expect them to have enough connections to rent or bring a flare. Everyone, to your places. Prepare for attack. At the complicated situation, Flora's expression turned pale. She had studied war tactics for a few days, so she knew about the power of the flare. When the flare starts to attack, the walls will collapse instantly. A powerful flame will come to destroy the wall and burn the soldiers, as well. There are only two ways to stop it: either fight with another magical weapon of that force or open the gate, go out and smash the flare. The former was impossible, Lawrence didn't have enough money for it. Magic weapons such as those could only be bought with vast sums of money. Then, the second one? It was a suicide to go out now. Just then, the flare spewed fire and fired a massive fireball. Quang. Rumble. Quack. Ack. With just one hit, the top of the wall fell instantly. Fortunately, the entire wall hadn't collapsed, but the soldiers who were hit at close range were screaming due to their terrible wounds. Moreover, this wasn't the worst. If the fireball had hit them properly, a dozen soldiers would have burned down without even being able to react to it. The opponent's power was beyond what they knew. It was something they hadn't planned for. The book said running away at such times was the best option, but retreat wasn't possible now. We cannot give up like this. She clenched her teeth and grabbed her bow. At least, I should do something. Just when she was about to make a move, a maid hurriedly approached her and shouted, "Miss! Miss! We just received a call from Roman Dmitri." What? That Roman from Dmitri? Roman, an unexpected name popped up. Also, the reason was unknown. However, that wasn't important right now, so Flora turned her head and headed toward the wall to fight. However, Roman Dmitri asked me to tell you this: Lawrence's crisis. If you want him to help, contact him. Hearing those words, Flora couldn't help but stop walking toward the wall. Chapter 42. The Flower of Lawrence. Part 3. The call was made through a magic device. Seeing Roman float in the air, Flora sat down and asked firmly, "A way to help Lawrence, what is it?" She asked straightforwardly. Now that the soldiers were dying outside, she needed any help as soon as possible to solve the problems of Lawrence. "As you're asking me that directly, I will be honest and tell you. I intend to take revenge on the Barco family for my own personal reasons. The decision has already been made, and from now on, it is a matter of timing on when to take revenge. So, I contacted you. If the Lawrence family says they will sympathize with what I came up with, I will advance the timing of my actions and bring down the Barco family for you." What Roman suggested was unexpected. For Lawrence, it was like finding an oasis in the desert. However, Flora knew that there was a trap in his words. "What do we have to do in your plan?" "It's simple, sacrifice for my plan. If the Lawrence family shows their willingness to be the first to bleed and lays down the plates, I will do my best to help you. This is a promise in the name of Roman Dmitri. In order for our conversation to go forward, this promise needs to be made." Sacrifice, it was a sensitive word. Hearing it, Flora's eyes twitched instantly. Roman Dmitri was a clear-cut man. She did go ahead and break up with him, but she couldn't sacrifice herself for the sake of others. It seemed as if she didn't want to hold that man's hand. Roman's existence was complicated for Flora. Continuing to be close to him and around him brought up unknown emotions from within her. However, she had no choice. In the first place, after being pushed to the edge of the cliff, like in the current situation, she was ready to put herself on the line. Perhaps he knew about our current situation and suggested it. Nevertheless, Roman Dmitri is the only one who moved and offered to help Lawrence. We cannot turn down his offer now. She clenched her fist. Self-esteem had been thrown out the door long back. Flora's first priority was her family's safety, so she looked at Roman and said, "I promise. If it means you will protect my family, I will do anything to help. One more thing. I need you to agree to something." "Say it." "Because of my participation in the war, words will definitely go around in the future. As our marriage is already broken, I have no reason to intervene in the war, and that is something the Barco family and the central government will also raise questions about. Therefore, there is something you will have to do with what comes next. If you want the Lawrence family to be safe, give me a justification to intervene in the war." Justification, until then, she didn't know what he meant. However, as Roman continued speaking, Flora couldn't control her expression. Finally, the conversation was over. She hadn't accepted the offer. At Roman's words that he will wait only for 30 minutes, Flora headed towards the wall with weak footsteps. Is it really the right thing to accept Roman's proposal? Roman, his words were shocking. The Barco family had made some kind of plan to split Dmitri and Lawrence. While I was drunk, they made me stay in a room with Emily Barco, a child of the Barco family, and they forced and pushed me to break the marriage, having that as an excuse. This is my personal cause to take revenge on them, and this is why I plan to punish them. Anthony Barco claimed that he molested you. I have nothing against him, but the fact that he did something like that made it tough for the Dmitri family to promote the marriage. Perhaps it will cause your value to tumble down. The reputation you hold as the flower of Lawrence will be shattered along with the story of the marriage being called off, and that is a fatal hit in the noble society. However, if you are fine with giving up the status of a noble woman, you can get one important thing in exchange, me solving this crisis of Lawrence." At those words, her hands trembled. It was a reality that Flora couldn't accept, but she didn't want to avert her gaze. She is no longer a flower in the greenhouse. In the face of the harsh reality, Flora was ready to give up everything. This is precisely the justification for me to intervene in the war. To not forgive those who touched me, the same happened with Blood Fong, and it will not be different this time either. If the time of molestation was before the breakup, Flora Lawrence, you were mine. So, if you can promise me that, I will ensure that Anthony Barco will never look at you with those lustful eyes ever again. You were mine. Hearing that, her heart skipped a beat. A mutually beneficial deal. However, Roman said that if their marriage wasn't called off, Flora would have been his. Right, she was someone he didn't even know. However, Roman was trying to do something dangerous with Barco for just that sole reason. Bang! Rumble! The wall has fallen. Put up the iron fence. After her short absence, she came to know the wall had fallen. Part of the wall collapsed due to the constant attacks from the flare, and Barco's soldiers could be seen marching forward. They wouldn't last long. It was only a matter of time before Lawrence collapsed, and due to the opponent's power, they had lost their advantage. It was dark. With flames burning the place and smoke rising up, Flora ran to the wall. Puck! Quack! Under the wall, one of the soldiers who was running fell down. Flora quickly used her arrow to help them out. She had been practicing for a few days, and the faint pain was still felt on her finger. However, that didn't matter. Flora tore her skirt, stood in a comfortable position, and shouted loudly for all the soldiers to listen. Attack! We will never fall. At that moment, Flora acknowledged that when she entered the battlefield, she gave up the role of the noble woman, which she had been living as all this while. Handel. The maid's name. Seeing Handel run toward her with a frightened face, Flora spoke with her eyes fixed on the target. Call Roman Dmitri right now. Tell him, I will do anything he wants, so get rid of those Barco bastards right now. I know for sure that I do not want to be a concubine under Anthony Barco. She made her decision. From now on, Flora would live a new life. Tuck. The magic communication was cut off. When Flora said she would accept the offer, Chris, watching from the side, asked, Are we going to attack right away? Roman and the soldiers, they were far from Lawrence. Even if he gave the order now, they would go to help immediately, but Roman didn't want to overdo it. No, we are going to watch for a little more. If we hold back, Lawrence might collapse. Barco managed to get the flare weapon under them. It is firepower that Lawrence cannot withstand. If you really want to help Lawrence and break down Barco's plans, we should attack the enemy now, making it tough for them to breathe and recover. This was the right advice. Chris had studied warfare, so he knew what Lawrence was capable of handling. However, Roman had different thoughts. Why do I have to care about that? Huh? It doesn't matter if Lawrence collapses. Even if the walls fall and Barco continues to attack, Lawrence, who is desperate to fight, will be able to last an hour. What I want the most out of the fight between Lawrence and Barco is a good amount of damage to them. Those were cruel words. He considered just the practical gains and excluded his emotions completely. Chris. Yes. There are a few things to keep in mind if you want to follow me in the future as well. It is more important to me that one person I know doesn't bleed, even if hundreds of those I don't know have to die. Obviously, a lot of people from Lawrence will die due to this. However, it is their problem because they followed an incompetent person, and I don't intend to force myself in the middle and sacrifice the lives of those who swore their allegiance to me. So, get some rest. When we decide to move forward, Lawrence earnestly, we will have a lot of bloodshed to do. I understand. Chris nodded his head. Now he knew for sure, Roman Dmitri, he might look cruel to others, but he is at least a man worthy to swear allegiance to. Above the wall, things were changing rapidly. With Barco's army getting close, Flora approached Viscount Lawrence and said, Father, open the gates right now and face the army of Barco from the front. What do you mean? Open the gates? That was something Viscount Lawrence couldn't understand. However, Flora didn't have the time to explain this in detail and just persuaded her father. I just made a deal with Roman Dmitri through a magic device. The reason we cannot stand Barco's attack is due to the presence of the flare. If we open the gates right now and distract the enemies, then Roman Dmitri will appear with his army and destroy the flare. Why will Roman Dmitri do that? I don't have time to elaborate. What is certain is that Roman Dmitri isn't the man we thought he was. At that moment, Viscount Lawrence was utterly confused. Roman Dmitri, after the blood fang incident, he clearly didn't seem like a normal guy. There was a sense of dignity around that man and the way he carried himself. Also, he didn't look like a person who would say one thing and do another. However, the problem was that he had no reason to help Lawrence. Naturally, he should be angry because the marriage was called off, so he couldn't think why that man would want to help them. Is it even right to trust that man and open the gates? From what my daughter says, Roman Dmitri is probably going to help with his own strength and not the help of his family. Moreover, the opponent is the Barco family. No matter how much we aim to distract their attention, it is difficult to defeat the troops, who are elite mercenaries, only by our soldiers. Also, without aura, the flare cannot be cut down. His judgment wasn't wrong. He was at a crossroads now. Viscount Lawrence felt weak. He was a typical docile person, and the more dangerous a situation was, the less his ability to make the right judgment. Father, no, Dad. This is a fight in which we are at a disadvantage either way. The moment we choose to fight back, we get to bet a lot on this fight, and if we fail to take down Barco, we lose Lawrence, our family, and our name will get wiped out of the history of the Cairo Kingdom, Dad. So trust me. Destroying the flare with Roman Dmitri, who is on his way to help, is the only way we can survive. Flora said eagerly. Viscount Lawrence looked at her. The armor over her body, the tanned skin due to intense flames, the torn skirt fluttering in the wind, and the bow in her hand, while the man known as the Lord was weak and unable to make a decision, Flora was able to find solutions. He believed in her, his one and only daughter. Viscount Lawrence overcame his fear and shouted to the soldiers. Open the gates now. Roman Dmitri has agreed to help us. Get out of the gates and slay those evil bastards of Barco. The gates opened wide. Following Roman's plan, Lawrence was ready to make sacrifices.